Hi, this is Tammy. I have received a question from my friend Carla McMahon. She was asking about workflow in Capture One when moving from Lightroom. She works in a top-down fashion in Lightroom, and I imagine that's just going down through the develop tools. And I can see when you open Capture One, the user interface is it's very confusing to look at first when you first look at it. And you think the learning curve is going to be huge. Where Lightroom has different modules, Capture One is one window. This one window has a toolbar, it has tool tabs, and it has the tools. Here is the selected image, and over here is the film strip that you can scroll through to see your images. Now, in Capture One, they don't call these images, they call it variants. So you might as well learn that right away when using Capture One. This, even though this is the original, they call it a variant. In Lightroom, in the library, if you right click on it, you can create a virtual copy. In Capture One, you right click and you can, you can create a new variant or you can clone a variant. The difference is a new variant is a new original version. A clone variant is a copy of this variant with all the adjustments. You can read about that elsewhere. But just know that this is based on this. So I have a variant 1 and I have a variant 2. This is the primary variant and this is a secondary variant. So that's what you know, that's what you'll read when you hear primary variant. That's just the first image. So this one here is all by itself. It doesn't have any variants or virtual copies, whatever you want to call it. It's the primary variant. So that might be confusing right away, but just so you know, that variant, when I speak of variant, it's not something extra, that's the image. It's called a variant. So this is the primary variant, and any copies you make of that will be secondary variants. So now looking at the tools, you see it looks very confusing. We have a adjustment tab and the color tab. There's a tab for lens corrections and things. There's a tab for tethered capture, and there's a library tab, and so on. So as I said, the user interface does look daunting. If you're just starting in Capture One and you're moving from Lightroom, if you want it to kind of resemble Lightroom just to get you started, then you can change the user interface, because user interface is totally, let me go over here, it's easier to see, is very customizable. You can move tools around, you can delete tools, you can add tools under different tabs, you can add tabs, you can move things around. But what Capture One has done is they've prepared some workspaces for you. And there's one called Migration. Migration has been made to mimic the Lightroom setup. So the adjustment menus over here, the film strips down below, and you have the image here. You'll notice over here there's no history tab or history menu. There is no history menu in, let me see, here's Lightroom. So when you're in Develop tool or module, you have history, presets and collections and things. You don't have that here, but they have set it up so you have your library set up as well as they could to resemble Lightroom, and then they have added adjustments with all of the tools that resemble Lightroom. The only thing missing though is a crop tool. The crop tool is here up at the top in the tool tabs. But I would, if you just right click anywhere here, add tool, and then go up and say crop, and you'll have the crop tool down there. That's the only thing I was missing. Another thing is this might be set up, the film strip might be set up to scroll like this. You might think that's cool. Or you can click the film strip here and it'll go sideways instead. And then you can make this a bit smaller. You get more real estate for your image. And now it looks a lot like Lightroom. So that's one way of starting. And then if you have a specific way of doing things, maybe you do white balance after exposure, then move white balance down underneath exposure. And then you can just start, well, layers we're not getting into yet. Exposure, white balance, or whatever. And layers, while we're at it here, there are no brush, the local adjustments here aren't little dots of brush tool. In Lightroom, you have a brush and you paint your adjustment, and there's this little dot that tells you there's an adjustment here. And what I like about Capture One, what I really like, is if you add a layer. I have a new layer here. If I open this, you can see I have a layer 1 now. And I take my brush tool and I brush here. I'll click M to show my mask. My mask is pink just because it's easily seen. And I'm going to change the contrast here. Darken that down, and saturation, whatever. So now I've made my adjustment. Now up in layers, I can say blue building or whatever. I can call it dodge or burn or whatever I've done in that, and then I can go back to that and I can add to it. If I can have a lot of adjustment layers. The different, you can clone and you can heal too. I'm not going to get into specifics, but the clone and heal tools are also, you can create a clone layer or a heal layer. So that's what your local adjustments are, they're layers. So actually your workflow could be starting off with the migration workspace and arranging these the way you prefer. And then when you do your local adjustments, you simply add a new layer. Also with the adjustment layers, you should know that you can adjust the opacity of the layer adjustments. And there's the Luma range functionality. And Luma range is about the same as in Lightroom, the range mask set to luminance. So a luminance range mask is about the same thing as the Luma range in Capture One. Also, it's interesting or good to know that wherever you see a paintbrush, that is an edit you can make on a layer. Where there's no paintbrush, it will be any changes will be added to the background, like black and white. That won't be added to the layer. So if you turn the layer off, it's still black and white, but your changes are still there. You see. Another thing worth mentioning is if you created a new layer and you wanted to use the mask from a previous layer, if you right click on the selected layer, you can copy mask from, like blue building. The mask, but not the edits, will be added to this layer. One last thing I'd like to mention, it's part of the workflow, I guess, is when you're finished with your image and now you want to save it as a JPEG or whatever. As in Lightroom, you export an image. You don't save, it's not save as. And you can either do that export, or where is it? Export images, or you can create process recipes. And these are really, really cool. Process recipes are kind of the same as in Lightroom when you go into export, and you can create all kinds of presets. export presets. So you have what size it is, what output sharpening, and so on and so forth. That is similar to process recipes in Capture One. Process recipes are a bit more comprehensive. I would suggest going into Capture One's resource hub if you want to know more about exporting images. So I forgot to mention how I import as part of my workflow. This particular catalog was a Lightroom catalog, all 960 some images. I imported the entire catalog using import catalog and Lightroom catalog. You just link to the catalog in the Lightroom catalog and it will import. It doesn't import the images, it leaves the images where they are, but imports the data, including certain adjustments, crop and rotation, and any keywording you've done are imported as well. I would suggest, though, doing it bit by bit. If you have a huge catalog in Lightroom, maybe several years, maybe export, go into Lightroom and export just a folder. Maybe your folder is 2016 or something. You can export as a catalog. Once that's exported, you leave the and you've exported the catalog, you can import that catalog into Capture One. So that's one way of doing it. Another way is you're finished, you come back from your trip, you want to import the images. I do the same thing I do in Lightroom. I transfer my images to a hard disk, I back them up, and then I link them in Capture One, the same way you do in Lightroom. So I go in, I select the folder I want, and then I say current location. So a copy isn't made, it's just links are created. So I can have my I have my Lightroom catalogs and my Capture One catalogs on my hard disk, and I have my images on an external hard disk. Same way I do with Lightroom. Now I realize that was a very quick and dirty overview of Capture One, but there are so many great resources and people that can explain the details of Capture One so much better than I can. I just wanted to give you a quick overview and ask you to check out the links below. One of the first resources I would refer you to is Capture One's own resource hub. It's available right there within the program. Go to Help and then Resource Hub, and you can see tutorials, webinars, the latest webinars and things. Sign up for new webinars. They're really good webinars, by the way. Or you can, I think if you go to more tutorials, does it lead you to? Okay, it leads you to Capture One tutorials here. Another place is the Learning Hub. Here is the Learning Hub. There are tutorials, webinars, and blog. And if you go down here, click on the filter Getting Started, you will get a really, really good overview. Lots of great videos to watch and go through and work with as you're learning Capture One, at least to get you started. I link to several other resources that I find very, very useful, and I hope that this gives you some kind of an idea of what I do. And if you have any questions at all, please let me know. That's all for now. Bye.